I still don't know how to explain what happened to me and my four-legged best friend a few days ago. I've been alive for 45 years and I've never seen anything like it, I swear. It just so happens that I live far from the city, in a small village, and I don't even have anyone to tell about the crazy stuff that's been happening to me over the last few days. I'm still scared to go to sleep, even with a double-barreled shotgun under my bed. My house is on the very edge of our dying village, and I've been living there for about 10 years. I moved there when I was young, away from the hustle and bustle of the city, to a village that was still more or less lively. But time passed, the clock ticked, the old people died, and the young people tried to leave this backwater at the first opportunity. Those who had nowhere to go stayed here. At present, only a few houses have been more or less preserved, and even those are not in the best condition. To be honest, I didn't really need other people. I hardly communicated with anyone except the saleswoman at our local store, and even then, only when I came to shop. And that was quite a long time ago, because our only store closed about 3 years ago. They said it wasn't profitable to keep it open for the sake of a couple of dozen colleagues who didn't have much money anyway. And delivering goods along a completely broken road is not a pleasant experience, and most importantly, it's not cheap. In general, we were left alone with Mother Nature. It was then that I got a dog, which later became the closest living creature to me in the whole wide world. I named him Bobbie. I've never been very imaginative. He appeared in our village like a bolt from the blue. No one knew where he came from or when. I was working in the garden when I heard barking behind the fence. I went home, took a piece of bread with lard, and brought it out to him to eat. That's how our friendship began. Since then, he hasn't left my side for a minute. I even made him a collar so he wouldn't get lost. Over time, I trained the dog to hunt. After all, for quite a long time, the forest had been feeding our entire village. The forest, the vegetable garden, and, of course, the relatives of some of our fellow villagers who came a couple of times a month to visit their elderly parents. That's how we lived. We hunted, fished, grew tobacco, and all kinds of delicious things in the garden. We had food to eat, which was perhaps the most important thing. Life went on as usual. Days, months, and years passed. Bobbie grew older, more obedient, and most importantly, smarter. He understood some commands, and in general, it seemed to me that he understood me as a person when I talked to him. He always listened to me attentively. I usually went hunting, but I didn't mind fishing either, and mushrooms and berries also found their way into my basket. About 2 weeks ago, I had a mishap. As usual, we went for a walk in the nearby woods. It was already getting dark. The sun was slowly setting behind the horizon, and it was time to go home, when Bobbie suddenly went crazy, broke free and ran into the thicket, as if he was afraid of something. He rushed so quickly through the trees to the bushes that I barely managed to follow him. But how could I run after a young dog? I tried, of course, to catch up with him, calling him, shouting through the forest, but he didn't seem to hear me, only occasionally whimpering like a puppy. So I chased him for a short while, until I tripped over a snag and lost sight of him. I always knew that animals can sometimes see things that are invisible to the human eye. They always react to danger and always let humans know about its approach in time. But not in this case. That's what I thought then, wandering through the forest in the hope of finding my furry friend. Evening was already falling on the forest, covering the treetops with its impenetrable blanket, and my friend was still nowhere to be found. Finally, when the forest was completely plunged into darkness, I realized that further searching would be futile. After calling his name a few more times and still not hearing a response, I headed home. I hoped that the dog would wander around and find his way back, because only we had trodden these paths. He was smart, so he would definitely come home. By morning, he still hadn't returned. I jumped out of bed at 6 o'clock and automatically walked around the whole house, hoping that the shaggy dog was lying in the hallway on his bed, chewing on the bone I had given him the night before. But no, the bone was lying untouched. I felt sad, and now, to be honest, I felt lonelier than ever, and bad thoughts immediately came to mind. What if something had happened to him out there in the forest? What if a wild animal had attacked him? Or something even worse? These thoughts made me immediately get dressed, throw on a jacket, packed something to eat, and set off again in search of my friend. I spent half the day combing through the forest thicket. Luckily, there were no leaves yet, and the snow had just melted. And even that didn't make the search much easier in some places. I walked, shouted, looked under every bush and tree, but I didn't find anyone. Having already come to terms with the loss of my beloved pet and wiped away a few manly tears, I headed home again, depressed and broken. In the village, I went around to all the residents asking if anyone had seen anything. But alas, my neighbors' answers only disappointed me even more. I was in a terrible mood. After drinking some herbal tea, I went to bed, still hoping that Bobbie would scratch at the door in the middle of the night. Sometimes I even thought about going out, even just to chat with my neighbors, but what could I talk about with pensioners who were slowly losing their minds? And then one evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a noise outside my window. The windows in my house are old, so even the slightest noise from the street could be heard clearly. So I hear someone scratching at the porch door, jump out of bed with joy, run to the window, and see my favorite standing next to the door, recognizing him instantly by the color of his fur. I quickly went to the porch, opened the door, and there stood this miracle, dirty as hell, covered in duckweed and some other algae. "Where have you been, you silly dog?" I exclaimed joyfully. "You've gotten yourself all dirty. Come on, come inside." The dog didn't react, sitting silently on the threshold, tongue hanging out, breathing heavily. I had to carry him into the house, straight to the bathroom. I didn't have any water, so I put a bucket on the stove and started removing all the aquatic vegetation stuck to his fur, along with the mud. "My God, where have you been, you silly dog?" I teased him. Never mind, the bone is still waiting for you there." God, I'm so glad you're back. And only later, while bathing him in hot water, did I begin to suspect that something was wrong with my dog. He was in extremely poor condition, thin as a rake, weak, barely standing on his paws when I scrubbed him with a sponge. "What's this?" Suddenly, I noticed a black spot that wouldn't wash off, but I soon realized it wasn't dirt. I didn't like the strange spot on his neck closer to his back. As soon as I touched it in an attempt to wash it off, the dog immediately snarled at me and began to growl. I want to note that this had never happened before in all the time he had been with me. "Well, Bobbie, why are you growling at me? Okay, I won't touch you, calm down." Anyway, I did my best to wash off the stinky dirt and algae. Judging by the smell and his appearance, Bobbie had fallen into a swamp or some other similar body of water. It didn't matter. The main thing was that he was back. I laid him down on the couch and in high spirits, yawned, collapsed onto the soft bed, and closed my eyes until morning. Several times during the night, I heard Bobbie whimpering, but my sweet sleep prevented me from getting up to see what was going on. In recent days, I had begun to notice more and more that Bobbie was not like the kind maned dog I knew before he ran away. It was as if something bad had happened to him in the forest. He was noticeably weaker, didn't go outside, and didn't eat well. He didn't even touch that bone that had been lying there all that time. I tried to pet him and scratch him behind the ear, but he just growled at me, as if those long years of friendship had never happened, as if he didn't recognize me. But everything turned out to be much worse than I had imagined. And it wasn't even about the dog, but about the forest where we had been hunting, and where my beloved dog had disappeared. What came to me was not him. It wasn't Bobbie. I became convinced of this one night when I heard him whimpering again in my sleep. And right next to me, I opened my eyes and saw him sitting by my bed, looking at me, his eyes shining like flashlights. Half asleep, I thought it was just the light reflecting. But when I woke up, I realized that there was no light on the street and the windows were tightly curtained. Bobbie was sitting there, growling at me, and then he started barking at the whole house as if he had seen a mortal enemy. I swear, when I got out of bed, he rushed at me and bit my leg. He clung on so tightly that I had to kick him off. Blood gushed from the wound, and I barely managed to stop it. But the bastard was still sitting in the corner of the room, snarling. So what was I supposed to do then? Kick him out of the house? It's so sad to do that to your own pet. Or is it, I had no way to take him to the vet and no money for it either? I sat there for about an hour, looking at him, and made an extremely difficult decision. Through my tears, I put a collar on my once beloved dog, and we went into the forest. After all, this wasn't really my animal. Bobbie seemed to have been replaced. I didn't recognize him. Maybe he had caught rabies? Who knows what could happen in the forest? I'll take him there and leave him there. I got dressed and went out after him. The dog was still licking the same spot I had noticed when I bathed him. I thought I'd take a look and see what was going on. Maybe it was healing since quite some time had passed. I approached him and put on a glove. At first, I stroked him gently and the dog seemed calm. But again, as soon as I got a little closer to the spot, Bobbie seemed to be possessed by demons, starting to bark and growl at me, so I jumped back in fright. But then I saw what was going on with that spot, and I wish I hadn't. It was just a bloody, festering mess. You could even see the bone. God, what happened to you? Thoughts immediately raced through my head. He got into a fight with someone. The wound got infected, and that's why he wouldn't let me near him. It seemed like a logical explanation, but it didn't change my decision. I couldn't leave him at home and watch the animal suffer, and I certainly couldn't bear to see him die. My heart ached as we walked into the forest. I knew I would return home alone. It was night outside, and my sleepiness had long since disappeared. I walked along our path and didn't even look at the weak, dying animal. But suddenly, in the same place as the first time, the dog broke free from its leash and ran into the thicket of the forest. I immediately followed him. I still don't understand why I did it. Turning on my flashlight, I pushed through the branches, jumped over fallen trees, and suddenly stopped when I felt something under my feet. Water was pouring into my shoes, and when I shone my flashlight ahead, at first I didn't understand, but then I froze in fear and confusion. In front of me was a small swamp, fallen trees on the right, and beneath it the corpse of my dog. Yes, it was Bobbie, but now he was almost completely rotted away. Only the skull remained, covered with torn skin and fur. I backed away. Who was I running after? Who was coming to me? Who had I been living with all these days? The corpse of my beloved pet had been lying there for a very long time, and it was obvious. It had already decomposed almost completely. A rustling sound on the right brought me out of my stupor. I instantly looked back and shone my flashlight in that direction, and I swear to God I saw my dog, whose silhouette disappeared behind a tree at that moment. And no, I wasn't imagining things. I immediately shone my flashlight on the spot where Bobbie's corpse had been lying, unchanged. The bones were still there. What was going on here? I asked myself this question, realizing that an inexplicable, terrible anxiety was growing inside me. I looked around and realized that I was lost. There were still bare trees around me, and my feet kept sinking into the mud. I had to leave. This wasn't going to end well. Without taking my eyes off my rotting pet, I took a few steps back and stopped again when I heard splashes of water in the middle of the swamp. I looked closer and saw something moving, as if something alive was coming out of the swamp. The first thing that appeared out of the water was a natural antler, either from a deer or an elk, I don't know, and then something resembling a human head. What I saw made my legs buckle and I fell to the damp ground, unable to take my eyes off what was rising from the swamp mud. A thin creature was pushing aside the duckweed with its limbs, trying to climb onto the bank. I was so frightened that I dropped my flashlight. I didn't have time to get a good look at it, but the fact that it had crawled out of the swamp into the thickest part of the deserted forest was enough for me. Pushing off the ground with my hands and feet, I crawled back, unable to even stand up, while the ominous silhouette, covered from head to toe in mud and other marsh vegetation, emerged more and more from the water. And then I heard a dog barking, and when I looked, my Bobbie was running up to it, jumping for joy, even though there was no living space there. The floor was rotten, eaten by worms and dirty as hell, and the horned creature was crouching down, barely standing on its legs, and petting him. That was the last straw. Leaning on a tree, I got up and ran in the opposite direction, barely managing to look ahead so as not to accidentally crash into a tree, while those two stood there by the swamp, watching me go. When I had no strength left to run, I fell to the ground and, catching my breath, tried to figure out where I was. But by a lucky coincidence, I had been running in the right direction and found myself not far from my village, and by morning I had returned home. Of course, there was no question of sleep, but that wasn't the end of the strangeness. That same day, I went to the well to fetch water for the house. My neighbor, an old woman named Mrs. Martha, was sitting on a bench in her yard, trying to catch a radio signal on her old receiver. She asked me for help, though her voice sounded strained and uneasy. I left the buckets by the well and went over to her, adjusted the antenna, and tried to find a clear station. While I was standing there, I noticed she couldn't take her eyes off my leg. She asked if I had seen my foot. I had come out in flip-flops, barefoot, and only then did I look down. There was a small black spot on my foot, in exactly the same place where Bobbie had bitten me. It was almost invisible. I was shocked that she had noticed it so quickly. When I returned from the forest earlier, I had also noticed that the house smelled like a swamp. Mrs. Martha reminded me that she had seen me going into the forest often and bringing back wild birds. She also knew about the neighbor's dog that had run off into the woods and then returned. She told me she had seen everything from her window. According to her, when the dog came back and I let it into the house, I had unknowingly let something evil inside with it. She shared her own experience from about 10 years ago. Her cat had once run into the forest and disappeared without a trace. She had searched for it for a long time, grieving deeply, and even the children had helped her look. There was something strange living in that forest, she said. Her grandmother used to talk about a swamp there, a place that seemed to draw animals in as if it were smeared with honey. Animals would run there and then return days later, but not as themselves. Even people from the village had disappeared in that swamp. Her cat had eventually come back, but after its return, she repeatedly saw someone walking around her yard at night, searching, prowling, as if looking for something or someone. She believed it was connected to whatever had come back in place of her cat, perhaps its new owner, luring others into the forest and toward the swamp. She remembered seeing a shape that had crawled out of the swamp, stroking her dog with long, bony limbs. Frightened, she eventually went to stay with her children. When she later returned home, her cat was gone. All that remained were traces of algae and duckweed. She warned me that the spot on my leg was a very bad sign. She advised me to go to church as soon as possible, light a candle, and seek guidance there. Her son was coming to visit in a couple of days, and she offered that he could take me into town. 2 days later, her son and I drove to the city. I visited the church as she had suggested. Gradually, the dark spot on my leg began to fade and life slowly returned to normal. The only reminder of Bobbie was a photograph of us together that I kept on my refrigerator.